Hello, I'd like to welcome all of you out there to the second lecture in Professor Aleksandr Dugin from Moscow State University's lecture series. This is the second lecture in the series on ethnosociology, and this lecture will focus on the study of etnosociology as a science and the four main schools of ethno-related anthropology. French, German, American, and English, correct? And so without further ado, I will invite you to enjoy the first hour of the lecture.
So, we are continuing our course on ethnosociology. To begin with, the most important school of ethnosociology is German one. So, first of all, the term itself, ethnosociology, was introduced at a very early stage of development of sociology as a science by one of the first generation sociologists, namely Ludwig Gumplowicz. Gumplowicz was German-speaking scientist, so he could be considered to be also the part of the German sociological tradition. So he was first to introduce the term of ethnosociology, and the concept was accepted in German-speaking circles, scientific circles, but in the other country, the same discipline, the same field of researches has received the different names. In the United States, exactly the same discipline was called cultural anthropology. In the England, the social anthropology, and in France, there was the confusion between concept of structural anthropology of Levi-Strauss or ethnology. So we are dealing with one and the same discipline. In German audience, it is fixed as ethnosociology. So in Russian, we also use the same term, etnosociologia, etnosociology. But to understand what is it, we need to make translation from country to country, from one scientific academic tradition to the other. These fields are exactly the same, but they have historically different names. So, to begin with, the first philosopher that has given great attention to the plurality of the ethnic society was German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder. And he first in the history proposed the idea that structure of the language determines the structure of the thinking, and the structure of the thinking determines the structure of society. And if we have different languages, so we have different cultures, and we have different society, and to express this idea in a poetic manner, Herder declared that the peoples are the thoughts of God. So it's very important scientific metaphor, because can exist among
the thoughts of gods. Some thoughts they are better than the other. It's quite impossible because all thoughts of God are equal and equality. All thoughts of God are divine. So we could not make difference of the hierarchical order between the thoughts of God. So that is a very important manner to understand diversity of the people and the cultures. Diversity that is a kind of richness, but diversity that excludes the possibility to make the comparison. Some people or some culture is higher than other. They are different, yes. They are completely different, but they are not hierarchically comparable between them. So it is a kind of most important attitude, the law of ethnosociology is diversity of the structure and the people without hierarchy. So diversity that give us not the possibility, doesn't give us the possibility to make comparison. So it was the idea of Herder to regard, to consider the history as a dialogue of the peoples, of the society, a kind of everlasting dialogue without any definite end or goal, everlasting dialogue of the different entities. The dialogue could be positive, negative. It includes the peace and the war, mutual understanding, exchange of ideas, but it's always the dialogue or polylogue. So Herder considered ethnic diversity as primordial fact. So we are dealing with men as ethnically defined being. So we could not imagine the man without language, without culture, without ethnical identity. Man is ethnical phenomena, and it is not only ethnical. There could be something more in it, but in the roots, any society, any human being is primordially ethnic. So it is a starting point for ethnosociology, and this is a most important principle: diversity without hierarchy. The development of the Herder concept, he was the enemy of Kant, for example, because Immanuel Kant affirmed that any society strives to be more and more rational, and rationality is universal. So any diversity of the society or ethnic culture is due to the distance from this concrete stage to the common universal ideal of one and the same rationality that is obligatory for any kind of society. It was Kantian Enlightenment concept. But Herder was partisan of completely different vision, more close one to the Rousseau's concept of the good savage. So the civilization is not the destiny, it's the possibility of, and we could also imagine positive and important and spiritually loaded society among the primitive peoples. So that was a Herderian concept of ethnos. There was the other concept of German philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte, who was Kantian and who considered the people to be the bearer of the subject, of philosophical subject. So it was a kind of nation instead of ethnos that Fichte was dealing with. So it is Kantian version of primordiality of the nation. So it is different from Herder, but also Fichte is considered to be one of the father of ethnosociology because he has linked society, historical society in national stage with a kind of idea or a kind of particular form of national rationality or a kind of subject. The other main figure in the German tradition of etnosociology was Johann Jakob Bachhofen, who has developed the idea of primordial matriarchy. So matriarchat. According to the Bachhofen, the patriarchat was introduced as a kind of historical form of society after existence of long ages of the rule of the women over the men, and he considered this gender issue and the culture as key concept to interpret the society. So he understood the society in the gender as a gender question, and also with this instrument he studied different kind of historical society. So ethnic aspect was mixed in the theories of Johann Jakob Bachhofen with gender issue. So all kind of societies were initially ruled by women, and after that there was a kind of men's revolution, and that is the key to correctly interpret ethnic history, because there are in the rites, in the legends, in the myths, different rests of early stages of human development, more or less linked with matriarchy. So the other important author of tradition of early German ethnosociology was Adolf Bastian. Adolf Bastian affirmed that in his most important work, The Man in the History, he argued that any kind of society follows the same path in the history. So the man possesses the common form of thoughts. They are more or less developed in one society or another. So he explained, Adolf Bastian explained the differences between the culture, the peoples and ethnic groups by the fact of the speed to develop and possibilities, historical possibilities to develop the same mental codes of the man. So the man is unique, and differences are due to as a kind of, they are a kind of obstacles on this path. So very important moment is geographical environment that could facilitate the development of this universal complex, or on the contrary, to be a kind of obstacle to that. So it is parallel vision of understanding of ethnos and its ontology. By the Herder, we see that ethnos is considered to be something unique and incomparable. There is not any, not such thing as universal type to which ethnic societies should strive or should progress. And the concept of Adolf Bastian is universalist one, and insists of unity of humankind in general. So we have here two limits of German ethno-sociology. One tradition, the tradition of Herder, insists on the pluralism, primordial plurality of the people and ethnic groups that will not be overcome by any future kind of social organization. So ethnos is eternal, and differences in the humankind could not be eradicated fully. So ethnos is primordial and eternal state of the society, and that is why Herder called the people thoughts of God. And the other limit, the other tradition, universalist one, but also dealing with ethnic groups, ethnic particularity, ethnic tradition, and codes. So in the line of the Herder was very important German writer Friedrich Ratzel, who is considered to be the father of political geography and anthropogeography. Ratzel thought that there is a very strong ties between the society and the nature and the landscape. So he has created theoretical basis for the geopolitics as a science. He introduced the idea of the law of the spatial growth of the state, and the idea of Lebensraum, the space for living. It was misinterpreted after that. What is interesting, that Lebensraum, the space for living, was not considered the space for this or other people to live in. It was considered as a kind of living entity, the space as living entity that could develop and could dictate to the society some cultural important and crucial features. And after that, in the German tradition and political sense, it was misinterpreted as purely pragmatic space to people to live in. Living space, it was not considered by Ratzel as space to live, but the space that lives It's a very important point in his organistic tradition. Ratzel drew attention to the value of sociological factor of space as development of this concept of living being, space as living being. He introduced the important concept of spatial sense, Raumsinn. So the space is something that has a sense, that makes a sense also, literally. What is produced in one point of the space and what is produced in the other point of the space, being similar, never are equal, identical, because the space does really mean. The space does matter. It's an important concept of Ratzel. He also proposed the theory, the basis of the theory of cultural circles, Kulturkreisen in German, arguing that all the material, technical, and cultural discoveries in the history were made in only one place and by unique people, and then distributed to the other people by the transfer. So the concept of uniqueness of any invention, that does not mean that only one people could invent. Different peoples invented, but it was once for all. Some ethnic group invented, for example, the spear or kind of a weapon or technology of process the metals, and after that, that was transferred to the other people. But some other people could invent different things and also distribute and transfer it to the other. But what is important? It was completely anti-Bastian concept that the peoples and the ethnic groups are geographically determined and not universal. So the history is the chain of concrete events, ethnically and geographically determined. It is something other than the movement to the one universal goal of the same type of living being that is standing to the same goal, but with different speed. Because the approach of Bastian could impose the idea of comparison, that these people or this society is closer to the goal, to the universal kind, than the other. So there is hierarchy. The progressive people and the people in delay, the people more developed and the people who are primitive or savage. So there is a possibility to compare the society because there is one universal type in the future. For example, future already realized in the Western society because it's kind of ethnocentric approach. But Ratzel or Herder thought otherwise. They thought that it is impossible to define the direction of development of all the humankind, of the humanity. So it is a kind of historical choice to go to one goal for one society or to the other. And the difference between them, between the society, ethnic cultures, and states and religions, is not due only to the negative conditions. Could not be considered as obstacles only as obstacles, but also they are options and the results of some free historical choice. The other, the development of the Ratzel's idea found their final form in the concept of cultural circles, Kulturkreise theory, by Robert Grebner, Wilhelm Schmidt, and Leo Frobenius, three German ethno-sociologists, Grebner, Schmidt, and Leo Frobenius. They investigated many archaic cultures to defend and to find the arguments in favor of the concept of uniqueness of invention. So their school, this school of cultural circles, was mainly occupied by necessity to prove the relevance of this historical approach to the inventions and particularity and uniqueness of every one. So there is among them, I would stress the concepts and the theories of Leo Frobenius, very important ethno-sociologist, who introduced the concept of two major types of the society. One type of the society he called chthonic society, and the other telluric society. Telluric society is a kind of culture, maybe primitive and archaic, that is dealing with the convex structures, poles, mounds, stones used for funerals, housing, or conduct magic ceremonies. This mound, the culture of mounds, is a sign of active, offensive, complex and patriarchal type of society for Frobenius. It is a kind of convex culture. And there was another type of society, chthonic culture. That is culture, by contrast, that is characterized by structures in the form of pits, of dugouts, holes, caves, used also for the same proposal as in a kind of telluric sacred places for funerals also, but to bury in the halls and the tombs and for the sacred and religious ceremonies in the caves. So this typology has nothing to do with development or primitiveness of the culture, because there are two directions. One of them is patriarchal and active, aggressive, telluric one, telluric culture, and the other more passive, more feminine, and so on. It has nothing to do with the progress, because there could not be progress from telluric to the chthonic or from the chthonic to the telluric. There are two types that could coexist, could mix, overlap, and so on. That is very very important attitude that is completely embedded in the operation of etnossociology. So study the cultures, study the ethnic groups without pronouncing which is more developed, more modern, more progressive. So there is the other concept of Frobenius that's very important is the concept of paideuma. The word is Greek, paideuma. It is a kind of education or self-education. It is a kind of the center of cultural code that is transmitted by the generations, paideuma. It is not only education in our sense, when there are institutions that are used as a formal center of education. The education as paideuma could be without any kind of formal institutions. It could be transmitted by the family, by the society, by the customs, or by the sacred rites, and so. So it is a kind of something that is more less formal than institution. It is a kind of the cultural code that is transmitted through the ages in the same society, and that determines the qualitative image of this society, that is transmitted identity of this or that society. So the paideuma, according to the Frobenius, has three stages. First, in German, it sounds as Ergriffenheit, Ausdruck und Anwendung. Three technical terms of Frobenius' ethnosociological theory, that paideuma is formed by the act or the moment of the spontaneous possession of the group by some primordial power. So at a kind of when someone is struck by feeling or by thing, that is a kind of the feeling of the sacredness of the world, sacredness of some object, sacredness of the state. So it is a kind, it's completely irrational, but it affects the community or the society and form the core, the first moment of the paideuma, and predefines in such a way cultural code, paideuma. After that, the second stage is expression of the possessing force in the form of the myths, rites, legends, practices, and here this force, unnamed in the first stage, acquires the name. So it is called God, or daimon, or spirit, or fathers, or elders. So it acquires a kind of expression. So it is second stage, and the third stage of paideuma is application, Anwendung, application to the technical sphere. So starting from this sacredness, we come to the technic aspect of the society. So it is a model to describe the ethnic groups for Frobenius. So first of all, we should define, is it telluric or chthonic? For example, American culture is mostly telluric one, is manly, is active, is aggressive, is optimistic. Russian culture is mostly chthonic one. There is more feminine, the Russian culture is more defensive. Russian spirituality is more contemplative than active. So we could also apply the theory of Frobenius to study not only primitive society, where it is also very clear. For example, in Africa, that was the main field of the study and the researches of Frobenius himself. So we could also apply that to the very sophisticated societies also, because it works also in the situation of complex society. So, and also it is first kind of definition of type of concrete society, but after that we could also study the paideuma of the society. By what in the first historical moment of such or such ethnic group or society it was struck. What was the first moment of its astonishment in front of the being? So Greek culture was struck by logos, by the experience of the bold of the logos. So there are different cultures. They were struck or amazed by something other, but it needs to be defined in any concrete case. So it is kind of Frobenius methodology. The other person that is very important to the etnosociology is Ludwig Gumplowicz. I have already mentioned him. His idea was the concept of the society as a result of superposition or overlay or overlapping. So any society, any state or complex society consists from two parts, from that two parts that have different ethnic roots. So the concept of the elite and the mass developed after that by Pareto, we could also find by Gumplowicz, who insisted that any state or any hierarchical society was formed initially as a result of the struggle of the ethnic group. So one of this group became elite, conquerors, and the other became mass. That was submitted by conquerors. So it was origin of the state. And what is important is to follow with Gumplowicz the roots and the sources of the social differentiation. So social differentiation of any complex society is due, according to Gumplowicz, to first inter-ethnical struggle act. He was opponent of Karl Marx. Karl Marx tried to explain all the history by Klassenkampf, by the struggle of the classes, and Gumplowicz tried to explain all the history as Rassenkampf, as a struggle between the ethnic group, because for him, he was not racist, he was Jew and liberal in his ideas, but persecuted by anti-Semitic tendencies in Poland. So he had nothing to do with racism. He was not racist, but the word Rasse, German word, he used in the sense of ethnic heterogeneity of the first stage of the creation of the state. Nothing more. So his ideas were developed by Franz Oppenheimer that continued to affirm the idea of the state as a result of the ethnic conquest, and that was also fixed in the differences of the culture of the elites and the masses. So Oppenheimer also developed this idea of superposition as the first basic act of creation of complex society and the origin of the state. The same idea was developed by Aleksandr Rust, that regard nomads and peasants as two fundamental types. Nomads were conqueror, that was social society or ethnic groups of conqueror, as Gombrowicz and Oppenheimer also showed, and peasants were, in the majority of the historical case, conquested group of the population. So for Aleksandr Rust, it was a kind of psychological inclination. So any aggressive elitist groups in the society were nomads, and any passive were peasants. So there are two psychological types. In history that was explicit, and in the modern society the same correspondence is implicit. So it was his idea of Rust, and he was also liberal, German liberal. He was he was anti-Nazi, and he affirmed that Third Reich was constructed by nomads, psychologically nomads. So Max Weber, German sociologist, that proposed the definition of what is ethnos in the sociological science. I could repeat it. Ethnicity or ethnos is human groups that share a subjective belief in common origin in virtue of the similarity of the physical type or of customs, and sometimes both, or by the memory of the general and common colonization or migration. This belief can be extremely important for the formation of the group. It does not matter whether this is objective, related by blood or not. So it is also the belief what is important in the definition of the ethnos. I have spoken already about it in the first lecture. So for Weber also considered that universalism is a proper, is good paradigm to regard development of historical society, but ethnos is a kind of first stage of this historical and social development, where the beliefs of the group, of ethnic group, are particular and not universal. So after that we come to the most sophisticated kind of society. So for Weber, the ethnos were not the main object of his studies, because he was mostly attracted by the study of modern society, actual society. But the other very important German sociologist, Ferdinand Tönnies, has proposed that there are two kinds of society: the society and the community. So the society is Gesellschaft in German, and the community is Gemeinschaft. There are two terms. Society, as well in the Latin, means that something associated, something that is fragmented, that is individual, and after that is aggregated. So society is aggregation of the individuals. So it is idea of the society by Tönnies. But what is community? Community is not aggregation. at some organic unity that precedes individualization. So in the community, the whole goes first, and after that, parts. In the society, the parts go first, and after that, there is mechanically created agglomeration as a society. So, two sociological terms. Modernity and the modern kind of society is always society in the strict sense. So it is Gesellschaft, is something associated, something created artificially, mechanically, aggregation. And there is community, the community that is something natural, organic. And that was mostly the form of pre-modern organization of the life. In these terms, what is ethnos? Ethnos is the community and not the society. It is very important to understand ethnos sociologically. So Werner Sombart, the third great German sociologist, with Tönnes and Weber, they were friends, and they, at the same time, they didn't have the same ideological visions, so they were very different. And Werner Sombart insisted that there are two kinds of society: heroic society and the society of merchants, market society. So two types with domination of two different concepts of men. The heroic one, that was a kind of traditional society, religious, and merchant society is a kind of modern capitalist society. They represent different types. So what is important in Sombart, that for him, heroic society that belongs to the past was preferable than a merchant society that belongs to the present. So it is very important, because for the Sombart, that is the question of the choice and not of the fatality. To create or construct heroic society or defend the heroic society was the result, or is or can be the result of the free choice and not of destiny. So we see in the Western society this heroic type is changed in the favor of capitalist society. That is a kind of historical truth. But for Sombart, it is not fatality. It is result of the decision, some kind of social decision. So we could also, if we continue to develop his idea, we could choose between types of society. We are not obliged to accept existing society as a moment of universal movement that is unique, one and the same for all types of society. It's also relativistic attitude that is very important to the field of ethno-sociology, that is pluralistic and relativistic. The other very important representative of organic vision of the people as a thought of God in the Herderian tradition was Maurice Lazarus, Jewish German author that developed the concept of Völkerpsychologie, the psychology of the peoples. So different ethnic groups have different psychologies, and the study, comparative study of different ethno-psychology was the main goal of Maurice Lazarus. He insisted, for example, he was one of the activists of the Zionist movement, and insisting on the relativism of the kind of cultural values, he also defended the particularity of Jewish people. So, and he explained by national spirit and the diversity of the national spirits, the possibility to Jews to create and defend their proper identity that is corresponded, that didn't correspond exactly to the identity of European people with whom Jews traditionally lived. So that was also this defense of plurality of the cultures and cultural code was for Lazarus very important point of his ideological Zionist struggle. The other two very important authors that we should mention here that developed also psychologist attitude to the history and to the study of society. It is great German psychologist Wilhelm Wundt, one of the founders of the psychology in general, who has dedicated last works of his life to describe psychology of the peoples. So it is less known part of his heritage of Wilhelm Wundt. And also the other author, Alfred Vierkant, that dedicated his researches to the study of the phenomenology of the ethnicity. Here we could also mention Sigmund Freud. He is the father of psychoanalysis, but also some concept of Freud could be applied to the study of primordial heart, to the primitive vision of a primitive group that could be considered as something ethnic. So contributions of the Freud to the study of primitive society and his special kind of understanding in the context of his psychoanalytical doctrine could also be useful studying ethnical patterns or ethnical cultural codes. So Carl Gustav Jung, one of his disciples, introduced the concept of collective unconsciousness that also could serve as an instrument to study the particular ethnic collective. But now we come to central figure in the ethnosociology is Richard Turnwald. Richard Turnwald, who made the systematization of ethnosociological knowledge, developing all the intuitions of the previous authors. So he has written the book that is called Human Society. It is very important. There are 5 volumes, very big volumes. All this work is dedicated to show how first type of most primitive society organized. And so the main importance of Turnwald that also introduced and insisted on the word ethno-sociology, that was understanding of ethnos as a kind of most that's the simplest kind of society. So ethnic society is a primitive society, the society based on common identity, on organic unity that precedes apparition of the individual. So, and studying these stages of society, Turnwald insisted that we are dealing with humans. So this kind of primitive society are not only the stages of the way, of the path to the modern, complicated, developed society. So there is a kind of implicit racism in the concept of evolution, concept of progress, because we consider to be fully human the people that, the men that belong to the modern society. And we consider the primitive people as semi-human, half-human. That the people who were only on the way to the humanity. I said, and that is the very crucial point for all etnosociology. Etnosociology, and the name of the most central work of Richard Turnwald stresses it, that any primitive society also is human society, and it is a part of humanity, and it is not only negative stage to the humanity, it's full humanity. So we could and should not judge the primitive society or simple society as something incomplete, as something on the way to the humanity. It is also the human society, but it is other humanity. It is human in other aspects of its living. It is other, the figure of the other, very important. And the name of this work, Human Society, in its ethno-sociological foundations, that is the full name of the main work of Turnwald, is very important, is a kind of program of all ethno-sociology. So ethno-sociology studies ethnos as human phenomenon. So man could be human in the sense of modernity, as a member of society, as individual, as Western or Westernized, but not Western, not modern, not member society, not individual, is also human being, different, and not necessary this human being should be turned in the modernity. Modernization is option. Westernization is a choice. Progress is a kind of one of human possibility among other. It's very important in the postmodernist attitude, this, but we see the same and very in a very fundamental way it is explained in the ethno-sociological authors. And for the Richard Turnwald, this was most important humanist task, to prove that any kind of society, and including not modern society and primitive society, are human. And we need to understand these societies differently than we are than we do currently. So we need to rediscover the human being, the sense of the man. Because if these society, they are completely different and they are based on completely different principle, they are human, so we need to enlarge our concept of what is human. And the last figure in this German tradition of ethno-sociology is Wilhelm Mühlmann, the disciple of Richard Turnwald, who also developed the concept of ethnos as simple society, also stressing the point that ethnical appartenance is not biological one. To be the part of the ethnos is in no way the result of biological or racial fact. It is a kind, ethnos is cultural community, is a kind of simplest community, and always there are possibility to enter in the ethnos or quit ethnos. So it is nothing to do with biology. It's absolutely social and cultural phenomenon. It is very important, it is most important point of Wilhelm Mühlmann ethno-sociological attitude. So, as conclusion of this first part of the sources of ethno-sociological knowledge, I would stress this point that the most important feature of this ethno-sociological approach is idea of the plurality of the society, the plurality of the human phenomenon, the discover of the possibility to be other and to rest human. So we need to deal with the primitive society or ethnic society or communities differently than we are dealing with a modern of Western type, highly complicated and sophisticated society. But we are in the realm of the human and recognize the human being of different society as human, as different but human, is the main goal of ethno-sociology. And that is also its humanistic program.